Well, I'm going to say that you're being very intellectually honest and you're giving very strong points. And I want to thank you for your patience because I'm not that much of an expert on these topics. Yes, exactly. So, from a statistical or from a scientific point of view, we could say that you're less likely to be wrong about the history of the world and this creation or its beginning than me,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
My name is Jonathan. You can call me however you want.
Jonathan.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you,
Yeah.
Jonathan.
Nice to meet you.
So, how old do you think the Earth is?
Well, I'm actually not 100% sure. I lean to believe in the young Earth theory,
Okay.
but I'm open to the Earth being very older, and I can justify it. Any logic, any interpretation from Scripture you can give me, I can justify it from logic that it's not unreasonable to believe it.
It's not
So, for
unreasonable to believe that the Earth is young.
it's not unreasonable from a logic perspective to believe that the Earth is young. That's my claim.
Okay. Would you say that rejecting pieces of evidence that all intertwine with each other is reasonable?
Well, it, I mean, the simple answer to that question would be it's not reasonable. But I was listening to the last guest. I was here for like maybe a whole hour. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But he was saying, I'm playing Minecraft. I need to concentrate. So basically, and you brought the argument that the Earth cannot be 6,000 years old because of the tree rings and this type of crystals and the decay, and that's perfectly logical. But what if the lineages from the Bible do not say that the Earth is 6,000 years old, but that humanity on Earth is 6,000 years old?
Well, then you would not be thinking that the Earth is 6,000 years old. And you said that you could defend any claim, any piece of or you could defend that, the Earth is 6,000 years old as reasonable in light of any claim or any evidence. But if you're willing to move the goalposts, if you're willing to say that, yeah, well, actually, I don't think the Earth is 6,000 years old. I only think humanity is 6,000 years old. Then that's just a different claim.
Yes, but maybe I didn't explain myself correctly.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to say is that the Earth can be, uh, based on your counter argument, right, from the lineages, uh, it is possible from scripture and interpreting it literally to say that um, many thousands of millions of years could Adam and Eve lived in the garden, and after the fall of sin, then that's where that counting of
Okay,
that lineage
great.
starts.
If you can navigate your interpretation of the Bible so that you therefore believe that the Earth is not 6,000 years old or 10,000 years old, but it's actually far, far, far older, like billions of years old, then we don't have a disagreement. You can still believe in the Bible if you want, as long as it doesn't disagree with all of the overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
Okay, and you also mentioned that you have a proof of society being more than 6,000 years old. I'd like to get
Göbekli
your
Tepe, yeah.
thoughts. Yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Are you familiar with Göbekli Tepe?
No, I'm not. Please
Okay,
enlighten
let me
me.
pull it up. So Göbekli Tepe is a village or like a small town, a small inhabited structure that's around 10,000 years old or so. It's located in Turkey.
Okay, and what is the evidence or that?
So radiocarbon dating was used to show when the earliest exposed structures were built.
So since I'm not going to be able to disprove that, because I'm not a scientist, I'd like to ask if it's possible. You're an expert in that field. Do you believe it's possible that decay could be exponential at some point?
I'm not sure what you mean by exponential. Do you mean that it could
At a
it
certain
could have been
point,
much, much faster in the past than it is today?
I mean that at a certain point, after a certain amount of years, the the rate that it starts decaying or we see it get older, gets faster.
Are you asking if it's logically possible, metaphysically possible, or physically possible?
Well, I mean, Do you believe that could be the case?
No, I don't.
And how can you be certain about that?
Because the basis for the constant rate of radioactive decay is founded on quantum mechanics, and quantum mechanics is the most well confirmed scientific idea that has ever been produced by humans in history.
Well, but I mean, you can't be certain about that, man. Or I mean, I wish I could be certain as you are, but I need to see the studies or to inform myself more about.
I mean, so look,
how that
quantum mechanics is like the foundation of essentially all microtechnology that we have that exists. It's also been verified to about 1 part in a trillion. Like the predictions of quantum electrodynamics agree with the outcomes of experiments to about 1 part in a trillion, which is better than has ever been done before in human history. That's like, 11 decimal places, right? Or yeah, it's like 11 decimal places. So is the contention that like we can't trust quantum mechanics because, why?
Well, no. I'm not saying that we can't trust quantum mechanics or that. I'm just trying to question how these systems work.
Yeah. So it is the, you could call them the laws of quantum mechanics, if you will, but I wouldn't use that kind of language. It is the it is quantum dynamics that govern the decay rates of atoms, and those dynamics are really well understood. So much so that we have very, very good reason to think that these are things that are fixed. They're constants of nature, if you will.
Very well. And what exactly? Okay, so you mentioned this village. What was the name?
It's called Göbekli Tepe.
Göbekli Tepe. Is that the only evidence we have?
So it is the oldest documented. Well, it's the oldest, as far as I'm aware, the oldest confirmed human, like inhabited settlement. But we do have evidence of humans from much earlier. We have like bones and stuff. We have, tools that were made by humans. We have teeth. We have. I think we even have some older mummies. That I can find though. Yeah, I think we have a mummy from like 10,000 years ago.
But we don't have nothing older than that.
So the oldest mummies ever found are smoke dried remains discovered in Southeast Asia that date back 14,000 years. Now I should probably look more into this because I'm not familiar with this, but the oldest naturally mummified corpse associated with the Chinchorro civilization was recovered from the Atacama Desert and is dated from around 7020 BC. So that would be about 9,000 years old.
Perfect. So that's, you would say that's not very far from the 6,000 years. 6,000
well,
years
it's like 50% older than that, and we have we have bones. Like mummies don't last for nearly as long as bones do. For example, we have bones that are far older. We have bones that are hundreds of thousands of years old. In fact, we have bones that are millions of years old. Not human bones.
Yeah, I put thought into that about the fossils and all that. But I mean, I'm just not convinced. Maybe you could lead me to the path so I can get more knowledge on this subject. But I'm not convinced that we can tell with certainty, with that much certainty, that how the age of a bone is.
Well, look. So generally, if we want to find the age of a specific sample, there are kind of 2 ways. We can either use indirect dating or we can use direct dating. Indirect dating is you go look at the age of things that were nearby, or like the layer of rock that the sample was found in, something like this. That is a way that you can indirectly date something, and that maybe you're a little bit more skeptical of that, fine. But there are samples that we can find that can be directly dated. For example, if you have like, I don't know, the remains of a wolf or something like this, and you have bones, for example, you could just do like radiocarbon dating and figure out that wolf lived 26,000 years ago, for example, or whatever.
How does that work exactly?
Radiocarbon dating. So essentially, the way that this works is that the amount of so there's a certain kind of carbon-14, that exists in the atmosphere at basically a fixed percentage, like a fixed percentage of all of the carbon in the atmosphere is radiocarbon. It's a small percentage, but just by living, by breathing, by eating food and so on, some of the carbon that you're getting from the environment is that radiocarbon. And so the radiocarbon that's in your system is always being replenished. So while you're alive, the radiocarbon in your system is basically the ambient radiocarbon. It's the amount of radiocarbon that's in the atmosphere as well. And that's basically constant. But once you die, you're not ingesting any more new carbon to replenish the old carbon that dated away or that decayed away. And so once you're dead, all of that carbon-14 that was being replenished, now it just starts decaying. And so you can figure out how old something is by how long it's been, by how much carbon-14 there is left in a thing's body. Because we know the rate at which it decays. And so all we have to do is we just have to, determine how much there's left, how much it started with, and then find the difference essentially.
Okay, so here's what's going through my mind right now. I'm gonna repeat the question I did a while ago, and I'm gonna make a second question before I forget it.
Sure.
How are you sure that the decay rate does not get faster as time passes?
Yeah, so we've already been over that.
The second one, before I forget it, if you can answer the first one, how do you know that the biblical flood did not have any relation to this in causing this effect on the bones and causing that we see them different or in a different state as how it should regularly be if we're in dry conditions?
Yeah, so I've already explained why it is the case that we know that decay rates don't change. And this is because the values of the decay rates are determined by quantum dynamics. And quantum dynamics are like super, super well understood. These are things that can be essentially treated as constants of nature. Saying that they change over time would be equivalent to saying that quantum mechanics is wrong. And there's like a huge burden of scientific evidence to overturn that. So, just the overwhelming amount of scientific evidence indicates that, yes, the radioactive decay rates are constants. They can't be changed at all. The second point, a flood, the question is could a flood influence the amount of carbon-14 that are in the bones of something? And the point is maybe, but then we can go look at other pieces of evidence if you want. I mean, like in principle, if you take like a bone and it's going to have some amount of carbon-14 in it, and then you like thoroughly soak it, like maybe you could change the amount in it just by like, parasitic whatevers. But then we can just go look for evidence of the flood. And if there was a flood that covered the highest mountains, then we would expect to see global floodplains in the geological record that are like a kilometer thick. But we don't see that. And hence, we have no reason to think a flood happened.
We would see what?
Global floodplains. So when floods happen, they leave behind floodplains. Basically, they strip off rock, not rock. They like strip away topsoil and sediment because the water is flowing very quickly, and it mixes it all up. So you basically get a big uniform layer of sand, dust, dirt, rock at some point in the geological record. That uniform layer is what's left behind from a flood. And you can see, these are called basically floodplains. You can see the records of these floodplains existing in places where we know there have been catastrophic floods. Like, for example, I think like 12,000 years ago or so, there was a large flood in North America from glacial walls breaking or something like this. And so you can go look in the geological record and you'll see like huge in the strata and like the geological record, you'll see huge parts that are like, oh yes, that's the flood because it's all uniform rock. But we don't see that uniformly everywhere, which means that there couldn't have been a global flood.
Yes, that seems very reasonable. But you would agree that if the biblical flood was true, it would have devastating effects on the land, on how we do our crops, even to this day, right? You would agree on that?
Yes, and we would see the records of that in the geological record.
Okay, so if you agree on that, for me that's not a problem. I know you're not going to accept it, but I'm still going to share it. For me, that's not a problem what you're saying, because I can believe with no trouble that God would have not just sent a flood to destroy all life on Earth and save a human family if he was not going to make the Earth habitable for next generation. So I have no problem with that.
But
because
global floodplains wouldn't affect the agricultural productivity. In fact, floodplains are generally very, very agriculturally productive. So it wouldn't really negatively affect people's ability to like do agriculture and stuff like that.
Well, even if we don't take it to the agriculture point, I can still acknowledge that maybe God that sent the flood if we believe that that happened, maybe the God that sent the flood would have been capable of protecting the earth so it would not leave any type of marks for a reason that only he knows.
Okay, so look, if the flood happened, how did the kangaroos get to Australia?
Maybe, well, there could be many reasons for that, many theories.
Okay, yeah, give me one.
Not based on science. I can give you some of my personal
Yeah,
theories.
okay, give me one.
For example, maybe God could have taken the animals there.
So, right, okay. So it seems like any time that there's a flaw in the story that you're telling, you fix it by saying, oh, well, God just fixed it. God just made it so it looked like the flood didn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, you could absolutely just say, yeah, all of this evidence, it's fake because God just placed it there to make it look like it's old. You could do that. It's just anti-scientific. It's just doing science denial.
Yes, well, I haven't made that claim. You said that.
No, but you did just give an explanation for how the kangaroos got to Australia. You said, oh, maybe God just put them there.
I said it's a theory. It's not scientifically based on nothing.
I mean, it's like a shower thought at best.
You told me, yeah, that's the way I'm saying. I said,
okay.
I have a theory. It's not scientific. There are many reasons.
Okay. Is there any justification for any of these theories that you have?
No, it's just a theory. You said a shower thought.
Yeah, shower thought.
That a shower thought that convinces at least me that there's no trouble with that, because yeah, you're saying that there's no kangaroos in Australia. To me, that doesn't disprove God. I mean, you have better arguments.
Well, no, but it kind of disproves a flood.
Well, to me it doesn't, because of what I just told you. I mean, there are many possible ways.
You could say that nothing. So I could offer you evidence after evidence after evidence that a flood didn't happen, and you could just always say, "Oh yeah, but God made it that way. God fixed it. God made it so that the evidence appears." You could always do that, and the point is that then you're just not thinking about this critically. You're just not taking the claim seriously because you're just ignoring all of the evidence that contradicts your worldview.
Very good. I'm not saying exactly that these arguments are not valid. I believe your arguments have a lot of validity, and that's why I'm enjoying this conversation with you. And I haven't left, because if I thought you were just full of BS or saying things that are not scientific, or at least this type of things, I wouldn't be taking you seriously. But I'm just saying that your arguments are not disproving my faith, and I'm giving you the reasons why I believe
they would, but your faith is too strong. Your faith is too strong. You can bend and twist and do a front flip to manipulate your beliefs in whatever way is necessary to come to whatever conclusion you need to avoid confronting the evidence that contradicts your faith.
Well, but having the theory that God sent animals to many various parts of the world after the flood is saying my faith is too strong.
Yeah, your faith is too strong. It can hold. Like, I'm sorry. Like you, if you, I don't know why you would believe something if you don't have evidence to support it.
Well, if you were to say that, I mean, a God who made the earth in a week, in 6 days, and yeah, he could have not sent animals to various parts of the world after the flood. I mean, that seems more unreasonable.
Well, you're right. A global flood is pretty unreasonable.
Again, do you believe that a God that could have sent... This is just logic at this point. Do you believe that a God that could have sent a flood to the world could have protected the earth from all the things that a flood could have caused?
If you accept a magic man, then yes, that magic man could solve the issue. I agree.
Okay, then how does the kangaroos in Australia disprove God?
Because you just have to invoke more magic. The point is look, if every single time I offered you evidence, you just said, oh, the magic man made it that way, then there's no evidence that could ever convince you, which means that you're being irrational.
Well, you're saying, I'm going to say that you're being very, very intellectually honest, and you're giving very strong points, and I want to thank you for your patience, because I'm not that much of an expert on these topics. But here's the thing. I mean, we can also go to historical facts. I mean, if we say that this man came here to this world 2,000 years ago, and he had these disciples, and they wrote this about him, and those disciples had those disciples, and then they had him, and that, and them, and then they come down to us. Who seems more unreasonable? The guy who has theories that don't contradict what the Bible says, but is trying to make it contradict the Bible, or the guy who has the history in his side?
I don't understand the question. Are we pivoting off the flood?
No, yeah, we are. Sorry, I'm gonna bring it back.
Okay. What was the point then? Because like, generally, I don't think that the historical consensus is that Jesus rose from the dead.
Well, the historical consensus is that there was a man named Jesus Christ who lived approximately 2,000 years ago and was
Well, there was a
crucified.
man named Yeshua who was labeled Christos by the Romans.
Well, yeah, that's just a name translation. That proves
Right,
nothing.
right. But the point is that like this says nothing about like, I don't know how this informs on a flood existing. I don't know how this informs on a man rising from the dead. I don't know how this informs on the age of the earth.
Yes. I mean, if we're gonna talk just from a purely scientific perspective, of course, I'm gonna concede that you have what was the word? I'm sorry if I'm not being 100% clear. I'm a Spanish speaker.
You're fine.
Yeah, but if we're gonna say that from a purely scientific point of view, I'm gonna say you're right. But yeah, I mean, the arguments you've given me have not contradicted the logic that I've been using, because when I say that God could have
just be the bare minimum of being logical, meaning following the inference rules of logic, like not contradicting yourself, the bare minimum of doing that doesn't make your claim true.
Yes, I'm not using it as evidence. I'm just using it as a...
So if you want to form beliefs, the reasonable thing to do is to form those beliefs in proportion to the evidence that exists for those beliefs. Right, that's the reasonable thing to do, but that's not what you're doing. You're not examining the evidence critically. What you're doing is you have a belief and then you're examining the evidence in light of those beliefs and then producing explanations for that evidence that conforms to your beliefs. This is kind of the definition of, what is it called? It's a type of cognitive bias, confirmation bias, I'm sorry.
Would you say somebody who does that, what you just said, to form form beliefs in base of most of the evidence, would you say someone that does that could be wrong?
People can be wrong in principle, but they are less likely to be wrong than somebody who doesn't do that.
Yes, exactly. So from a statistical or from a scientific point of view, we could say that you're less likely to be wrong about the history of the world and this creation or its beginning than me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But what about a historical point of view?
What about it?
Well, what I'm trying to say, that the mass transition of this man named Jesus, having his disciples and spreading a gospel throughout the world, and we having it up to this day, teaching these things about the young earth and yeah, pretty much the whole Bible. I mean, it doesn't. I don't see how it contradicts your science.
Well, look, if the claim is that the Earth is young, then that contradicts the scientific consensus. Yeah, it just explicitly does, because the scientific consensus is that the Earth is quite old.
Okay, but if I said to you, well, at this point, I can't use any argument based on biblical logic, because you're going to say Magic Man did it. I mean, now I can't say that maybe God created the world with an inherent age, just how he created the chicken and not the egg. I mean, you're not going
to... If he did that, then your God is a liar.
How?
Because your God is planting false evidence, right?
How exactly is he planting false evidence?
He's leaving behind evidence that indicates the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, even though it's not.
Well, he could have just created
false
the world.
Evidence.
He could have just created the world as a simulation, and then at a certain point, I mean, as technically, to use the word simulation, right? Not exactly a simulation, but he could have just created the world and let it simulate for a couple million years, and then start using it.
What does it mean to create the world then? What's the difference between the created world and the simulated world?
Well, maybe I'm not being clear. I mean, maybe God just did what the first chapters of Genesis say, where he creates the world and how he did
And
everything.
then the fifth or on the sixth day, he created humans.
Well, I'm not sure if it was the sixth day. I'm gonna say yeah. And then then Adam and Eve lived thousands or millions of years in the garden, and then
Doesn't it say that Adam lived like 900 something years? Isn't that in the Bible?
Yes, it does say that, but we're not certain if that is since his creation or after he sinned and his life started counting.
Yeah, okay. So then the claim would be that the Earth is billions of years old. It's just humans never left the garden until 6,000 years ago.
That's a that's a possibility.
But then you're not disagreeing with the prompt. The prompt is the Earth isn't 6,000 years old, and if you're saying the Earth is billions of years old,
I don't entirely disagree with the prompt. I was just listening to your conversation with the last guy and how you were talking about these subjects.
Okay, I mean, yeah. Look, like if you don't disagree with the prompt, then you don't disagree with the prompt, and that's fine, I guess.
Okay.
Thanks for being here, Johnny. Sorry, not Johnny, Jonathan.
Have a great day.
Likewise.
Thank you.